for coming out tonight and supporting live jazz. My name is Sam Griffith. I'm the Director of Jazz Studies here at the University of Missouri, and we're very excited to be presenting a concert for you tonight featuring primarily music of the Caribbean. I am fortunate to basically watch this band rehearse on Wednesday nights. They're led by the wonderful Jesse Hamilton. We can give Jesse a big round of applause. Jesse is near completion of his master's in music performance here in trumpet, and we'll be sad to see him go in a few weeks, but glad to be sharing this musical time with him now. We can give another big round of applause for Diego on piano. I think we heard some piano solo. And we also heard from Sophie on the trumpet. Big round of applause for Sophie on the trumpet. That first composition was entitled Afro Blue by the great Mongo Santa Maria, arranged by Michael Philip Mossman. I almost said Tilson Thomas. That's a classical person. Michael Philip Mossman is a jazz person. Michael Philip Mossman is a wonderful jazz trumpeter and arranger who writes very, very good arrangements of Latin jazz music. I strongly recommend checking out all things Michael Philip Mossman. I believe this band's going to continue on with a Gordon Goodwin composition entitled Floating Home.
All right, how we doing? Good. So like Sam said, my name is Jesse Hamilton. I kind of am TA for the jazz department and conduct the group. That was Floating Home by Gordon Goodwin. Gordon Goodwin is not easy stuff to play just because it's an LA band, and so the group is comprised of LA's finest musicians, whether that be freelance or just by contract with the group. So can we get another round of applause for these people for just even trying it, let alone killing it like they did. Let's also get another round of applause for Yoel on sax, for Abel on trombone, for Lucas on trumpet, and then also for Olin and Greg who are trading some percussion after that. So the next tune we're going to be playing is, sorry, I should know this by now. We're going to be playing a tune called The Duke by the great Dave Brubeck, written kind of is inspiration of Duke Ellington, maybe in tribute, but just a great little tune that that includes a lot of Afro-Cuban stuff, so I hope you enjoy. Can we give another big round of applause for Yoel again on sax, and then for Luca, not Lucas, on trumpet. All right, the next tune we're going to be playing is certainly a favorite among the band. Give me 1 second. Certainly a favorite among the band, for sure. They love this tune. And I'm sure that a lot of you are going to know it as well. This is Dizzy Gillespie's Manteca, probably one of his most popular and famous big band tunes, as far as big band tunes go for Dizzy Gillespie. This is mainly going to feature Gunnar on trumpet, so I hope you enjoy Manteca. And also John on tenor. My bad, John. Can we get another big round of applause for John and Gunnar, please? So the next tune that we're gonna play, I gotta be honest and say I don't know too much about the composer Ryan Haynes, just because I genuinely can't find anything about him. As best as I know, he was once part of a military jazz group. Don't know which one. I just find a bunch of pictures of him in some sort of military outfit. I just can't figure out which one it is. But this tune, I'm trying to decide if I want to pronounce it the way I think it should be pronounced or the way the band thinks it should be pronounced. The band thinks it should be pronounced La Jolla Cove. I think it should La Jolla Cove. Sorry, I think it should be pronounced La Jolla Cove. You can argue after the concert with whoever you deem fit as to which it should be. But nevertheless, this is another great tune that kind of features that reggae feel, very laid back and just easygoing style. This one is going to feature Yoel again and Abel again. This is La Jolla Cove. I'm sticking with it. Another round of applause for Yoel and for Abel, and then also for Greg. Yeah. All right, the next tune we're going to play is this composer I know a little bit more about. Eric Morales is a really, really great educator, composer, and trumpet player. He writes a lot of great music, whether it be solos or chamber pieces for both trumpet ensembles and for brass quintets. Like he's just great. He's written a lot of music, and everything that he writes I just truly enjoy, and this is no exception. Invitation is great little tune that starts out in this kind of like easy swing, but soon we kind of, about halfway through the tune, we get into this faster, almost mambo section, which is really, really a really cool thing that we can't get in any of the other tunes. So I'm glad that I found this and programmed it, because it's just such a joy to get to that point. This is going to feature Lucas on trumpet, so this is Invitation.
we give another round of applause for Lucas on the trumpet? I also want to take a minute here and acknowledge our many rhythm section members. Anytime you're exploring new music, especially music of Latin America, music of the Caribbean, there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of different styles, a lot of different grooves. We'll start with our drummers. Can we give a big round of applause for Olin and Greg on drums? And our bassists, Sydney and Elise. Our guitarist, Nate Lincoln. And our pianist, Diego. Before this band plays their final selection for you tonight, just a few reminders about a few other jazz dates that are happening. In the month of April, this band, along with the concert jazz band, will take over the Columbia Jazz Orchestra spot at Broadway Brewery on April 28th. That's a Monday night. It'll be a very long evening of jazz. I think 2 combos will open up before those bands play. If you're interested in attending that, I strongly recommend making reservations, as that establishment has a history of being very full on nights where there is jazz. 2 days after that, the Columbia Jazz Orchestra will be playing a great concert with the wonderful saxophonist Bobby Watson at the Missouri Theater. This is going to be like a very special event. I think the whole thing's going to be recorded and potentially air on PBS or something. There's some exciting news with that particular event, but I strongly recommend everybody also be able to go out and check out the Columbia Jazz Orchestra with Bobby Watson on April 30th at the Missouri Theater. I don't think I'm overlooking any other pertinent jazz events for now. I do want to make sure we give Jesse another big round of applause for his time with this group. We'll say goodbye to Jesse and the students that are graduating at the last gig. I want to do that now because we got plenty of music still to make before that. This band's going to close with a great piece written by Paquito de Rivera, who was one of the original founders of the Afro-Cuban group Irakere. That's an amazing group. If any of you know the trumpeter Arturo Sandoval, he was also in that group. This song was written for one of the greatest pianists in the history of Latin jazz, Chucho Valdez, and is a wonderful sort of Latin jazz stamp at this point. Thank you guys again for coming out tonight and supporting Loud Jazz. We greatly appreciate it. This is Chucho.